And let's move quickly. The next presenter is Joe Abba. I would like to say that when I first got to know about SPAC, I thought SPAC had three faces. One was the gentleman who ran the program in Kano, David Modi. I think he's no longer with SPAC. And the second was Awolo Hamza in Jigawa, because, you know, I knew Awolo Hamza personally, and I was told he was working for this program called SPAC. But I think the main face was this gentleman that, although I knew, I had the name, I never had that opportunity to meet him. And the first time I met him, I thought he was this soft-spoken but intelligent gentleman who also was very passionate about governance and reforms and institutions. I was working for James 3 then, and I had a consultant visitor, Raji, I think, and they had this long argument about governance and institutions, and I was really impressed. I was glad that I met him then, and I'm glad I'm meeting him again. Joe Abba, please, can you make your presentation? Thank you very much.
Okay, I think it's just about afternoon, so good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Please forgive me, I don't do protocols. If you're offended, sorry. I thought what I'll do is to share some experiences with you about various public service reform efforts across the world and what we've learned as a result of those efforts. And I'll be making, I think, about 15 or so very provocative statements about what I think we've learned and what works and what doesn't seem to work. And I'm sure you'll have your opinions about each of them. You know, when Margarita asked me to speak on this, I didn't actually get around to writing the presentation until 2 o'clock in the morning. At which point I felt, okay, it's better I just show you the books I'm relying on for what I'm saying. Of course, having a PhD gives you the license to pontificate, but that's not what I'm going to do. I'll actually show you the practical and theoretical backing for each of the provocative statements I made. So, you know, what we've learned actually is that when we try to reform public services anywhere in the developing world, it can actually feel like you're swimming against the tide, as if you're trying to do something that nobody actually wants you to do, but everybody knows it needs to do. That's what it feels like a lot of the time. So the World Bank has looked at this issue. They've looked at where their money has gone and how it's been used. So they produced a document called Public Sector Reform, What Works and Why. And basically they said some dimensions of public service reforms improved, but there were significant shortcomings in important aspects. This is the public service reform effort funded by the World Bank. Okay, so there were some dimensions improved, but there were significant shortcomings in important aspects. So that is the World Bank's way of saying, let's go back please, is the World Bank's way of saying that most of the public service reform efforts they've supported in developing countries have failed. The one at the top is the diplomatic speak. The one at the bottom is what it really means. Okay, and there are a number of reasons for that, which we will explore as we go on. Okay, so the first statement is that reforms tailored to the local context have a better chance of success. So what works in Zamfara may not work in Kaduna, what works in Kaduna may not work in Kano, and it is not true that Lagos is different. It's not true. Everybody is different in one way or the other. Okay, so because everybody is different, you need to tailor context. You need to tailor your activities to the context. But what then happens if that local context appears to be dysfunctional? Do you tailor your reforms to a dysfunctional context? Because there are some systems and institutions that may appear actually to be designed not to work. If you look at it, it seems like it was actually designed not to work. And so how do you do reforms in such an environment? Is it possible? Well, the second thing we've learned is that even in the most difficult institutional environments, you have exceptional, well-performing government organizations. No matter how bad the country is, even Somalia, Sudan, doesn't matter how difficult the institutional environment is, you have organizations that work. So, why is this the case? And how does this tend to happen? People look at reforms, or tend to look at reforms in two ways. Some people think you need to do a holistic whole of government reform for it to work. People like Mark Obama, things you need to look at across the piece and make sure that you are focusing on the things that the main levers within government that can actually drive change. Then you've got Matt Andrews with his problem-driven iterative approach. And some people actually think that these two are diametrically opposed. Okay, so Matt Andrews' view is you need to focus on problems. If you go and say you want to reform the whole system, you will fail. And one of the reasons why there have been so many failures in public service reforms is because people have tried to do a big bang approach. So the approach he recommends is a problem-driven, iterative approach. So you solve one problem, you go on to the next problem, you solve the other one. Okay. So the whole of government approach has its challenges because you take on so much, you may lose focus, you may be trying to do too much at the same time. But the other approach also has limitations because if you are not careful, you're doing what we call retail reform. Many of you will be aware of something called an Orosoye report that seeks to rationalize the number of agencies and parastatals in the federal government. And you will also be aware that the APC government have been in power now for about 1 year and boards have not been reconstituted. Do you get where I'm going to? There's a political need to reconstitute boards because people are hungry. Secondly, we do not want to constitute boards for an agency we're going to scrap tomorrow. And so, I cannot wear my technical hat and ignore the political pressures. That is an example happening right now as we speak. Okay, so the way the public service performs is subject to politics. Okay? It's subject to politics, it affects political will, it affects the amount of resources given to particular initiatives, it affects a number of things. It affects your chances of success. So simply taking, and that's what we get when we look at things like public financial management reforms. Okay, public financial management reforms tend to be sequential, and you just do them. Change chart of accounts, no problem. You change the budget calendar, not a problem really. The problem will come when it starts to rub up against the politics. And that is why civil service reform is far more complex than public financial management reforms, because then you're dealing with human beings, you're dealing with emotions, you're dealing with jobs, and you're dealing with political considerations. That's why it's always more difficult. So, the fourth thing, you need to bear the politics in mind and not just take a purely technocratic approach. Fifth provocative statement, sudden and drastic downsizing has not worked in developing countries. It hasn't. If you know of anywhere, please give me an example. What has worked instead is gradual approaches to reducing the size and cost of government. And these books by El-Rufai and Okonjo-Iweala, if you read them, they will tell you that virtually everybody that was sacked found their way back into the system 2-3 years later. Almost everybody. Okay, so because that sudden drastic sack everybody, sack them all doesn't work. It's far more complex than that. But if you take steps to gradually reduce the size and cost, then that has a better chance of success in most developing countries. And all of this experience, I can share examples from Nigeria, but I can also share examples from different parts of the world. Okay. Here's another one. Assuming that setting out formal rules or passing laws alone is enough to change behavior is erroneous. Again, very many donor organizations get into this problem because they think, oh, all I just need to do is get that law passed. I need to get it ratified at Expo. I need to have it gazetted. It doesn't mean that behavior will change. We have laws in Nigeria for virtually every single thing. In southern Nigeria, it is still a crime to have more than one wife, punishable with 7 years in prison. Except that the judge that will try you has 4. So, you can't just look at rules and laws alone. Okay, you need to look at what is conditioning a particular behavior. What's conditioning a particular behavior? Because unless you understand that, it's very difficult to design appropriate interventions that can make any difference. So, if on Sunday I go to church, on Friday I go to the mosque, I'm part of my church building committee, because the church is always building one thing or the other. If it's not a permanent site, it's a house for the pastor or priest, or the recent one, the school. They're always building something. So if I'm a member of my church house building committee, we find that not one kobo is ever embezzled. Not one kobo. That project is delivered to time, to budget, to standards. But if I walk into the ministry on Monday morning, I suddenly become a useless civil servant in need of capacity building. The same me. What is it that happens in my head between Sunday night and Monday morning? If you don't understand that, you can't begin to design any interventions that will affect you. It doesn't matter the laws you pass. It doesn't matter the rules. We have public service rules, we have codes of conduct, codes of ethics, we have them all. Okay? But unless you start to address some of this, you're going to have a difficulty. Next one. If you copy models blindly from elsewhere, it doesn't work. It just doesn't work. So, go to the next slide. Let's give an example. China has lifted 600 million people out of poverty in the last 30 years. and demand is growing among other developing countries to learn from this remarkable progress. This is the World Bank's president. Don't forget that the population of Africa is about 1.1 billion today. Lifting 600 million people out of poverty in 30 years means that actually in about 50 years, all of Africa can be free of poverty if we follow the China model. But we are not China. China has designed what works for China. And that's why the economist Paul Collier says they've done it without listening to a single Western economist. They ignored the advice of all Western economists and designed what works for them. So, while China has made a lot of progress and demand is growing to learn from the progress they've made, we come back to one of the earlier provocative statements: it must be tailored to the local context. Next. If you fail to protect and nurture reforms to maturity, it will lead to infant mortality of reforms. And again, I know we're here for the SPARC end of year, end of program event. But I'm also here for the SPARC 2 beginning of program event. So what I'm saying straddles both what we're here to do now and what we want to do in the future. And that's important because, in my view, a lot of the success that SPARC has been able to achieve is because there's been sustained support to a number of initiatives over a number of years. And it's built on the successes of the previous program, the state and local government program. And it's important that going forward, it doesn't simply throw away everything that has been done and everything that has been learned. Because if you do that, I think the next program is only 5 years. You begin initiatives and ideas that you will not be there to complete. Okay, so it's vitally important that we protect reforms and we nurture them to a stage where they can actually survive without us. And that means following a plan. Following a plan. And this is one of the things that I've talked to David about for a while. And I don't know if they are doing now, they may well do, which is to have a plan for the state. So there's the Zamfara plan over the next 15, 20 years. So whatever program comes, there's a plan that is following and building on. That is quite important. So if you look at lessons from elsewhere, reasons for success, look at political economy of development and change, it's one fact that we are aware of. I won't even use examples from Nigeria about things that have been started and died at their infancy, not because they were not good ideas, but because they just simply were not supported and nurtured to maturity. The 10th statement: monitoring public sector performance is difficult, but it's rewarding. And evaluating results helps to connect with the public. So, if you take a very basic statement, the best measure of any private sector organization is profit. Forget about whether they say they are doing corporate social responsibility or they are sponsoring beauty pageants. The shareholder wants to know, for my return of investment, have you made profits? Whereas the public sector is a lot more difficult to assess in terms of performance. Because you're looking at the inputs that have gone in, the outputs that have been delivered, the outcomes, how the world has changed as a result. And you're looking at social responsibility, you're looking at, there's a difference between a private university and a federal government university. And if you take the purely profit approach, some people will simply not go to school. Okay, so there's a difference between how you measure performance in the public sector from how you measure it in the private, and it is difficult. And it's particularly difficult with ministries, because while agencies have a clearer focus and mandate, it actually takes efforts to sort out the mandate of a ministry. It takes a deliberate effort to do that. This is the mandate, this is what they are there, to deliver. Oh, my time finished already. Okay. All right. It's important to focus on merit. Merit improves performance and accountability, attracts better staff, reduces corruption, and aids development. This is for any government official that is here. The gains from patronage are short-term. They are short-term. If you actually want a better functioning system, you need to focus on merit. And the federal character principle is not against merit. What is against merit is the abuse of the federal character principle. There is no problem with ensuring you have representation and at the same time focusing on merit. The two are not inconsistent. Next. Flexibility, pragmatism, and vigilance for opportunities are crucial if you want to succeed in this arena. You need to be fleet of foot. You need to be opportunistic. You need to be pragmatic. Don't set your stall too high. And you need to be vigilant for where opportunities exist. And so, for instance, if there's a change of government, change of personnel, somebody may have a particular interest, which may mean that what you have planned to do in 2 years' time, you can actually fast track now and get that goal. Next. These are two gentlemen who are far more good looking than I am. But it's this issue between political leadership and organizational leadership. Because somebody will tell you, oh, the answer is political will. Once you have political will, but you can actually have political will without the capacity to actualize that political will. And you can have a very competent organizational leader that doesn't enjoy political will at the top. This was actually quite a debate of President Obasanjo saying, yeah, Ribadu is very good, but I helped him a lot. And Ribadu said, yeah, General Olusegun Obasanjo was a fantastic leader, but I would have done everything without him. So, we think the two are important. It's important to have political leadership. It's also important to have competent organizational leadership. We found that in places where there's a combination of the two, results have been achieved much more quickly. Supporting peer learning is more effective than traditional capacity building. And we took part in this study from Harvard, Los Angeles and McManning. They came to the Bureau to look about how we do peer learning, how we learn from each other. And do we even learn anything from these donors at all? And one of the things that was immediately obvious is that we don't sufficiently support learning from each other. And I think that's one thing that Spark has tried to do very well, with things like share fairs and knowledge exchange events and all of those. Those things actually make a lot of difference, because you have practitioners sitting and sharing experiences about what works and how it works. Much better than putting us in a classroom and that one will just go for the GTA and the lunch. So it's important to try and facilitate how people can learn from each other, because every single state sitting around this room is good at one thing or the other. And so if you can harness that, you can actually build capacity quickly. Next. If you manage donor support properly and intelligently, it can help. And the key words are properly and intelligently. And also help. Help because the responsibility for reforming and changing our system is on us public servants. The donors are simply there to support us. Things will only become donor-driven if you are not clear in your mind what you want. Then they will come and drive it for you. If you are clear in your mind what you want, then their support will help. It will help you achieve that. So where aid hasn't worked, where donor assistance hasn't worked, in my view, it has not been properly and intelligently managed by the client. Again, you can disagree. Next, I think this is the final one. There's no silver bullet for reforms. Various things work, depending on context and circumstance. There's no, if there was one way of doing it, we'll all be doing it. So various things work, and you need to tailor them to the context and the problems that you have. I think this is finally that whatever reforms we're doing, if our citizens are not seeing tangible improvements on the streets, our view is that it's a waste of time. And the various purists around the room may have differences in opinion, because you can assess whether your public service reform is working based on efficiency. Are you efficient? Are you providing the most you can for the money you have? We believe that Boko Haram is extremely efficient. A small band of people holding the whole country to hostage. Or they were extremely efficient. But extremely efficient are doing the wrong thing. And that's why a blind focus on efficiency without looking at the impact on citizens, we think is wrong. Let's start with what is the citizens' experience when they come in contact with government, and then work our way backwards. Of course, economy is important, effectiveness is important, efficiency is important. But let's use what the citizen experiences when they come in contact with government as the true measure as to whether reforms are working or not.